Hey guys, what's up? It's Jeremy from WeldTec Designs, and I'm going to show you today how to install your new HTR suspension. Now, what is HTR suspension? Hit the road, because we know that if you have a Class C like this, that's what your goal is to do, and you want your motorhome to drive better. So we're adding Fox shocks to the front of it, Fox shocks to the rear of it, as well as a steering stabilizer up in the front. Now, all these are really going to work well together to make your motorhome drive amazing. Well, as amazing as we could possibly make it without going real big, like a suspension kit from WeldTec Designs. Today, I'm gonna show you what's involved in installing all of these components and more. So you're gonna wanna hang out with me for a while. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna pull this thing in the shop and install some Fox shocks on it. Let's go. All right, so with this motorhome in the shop, we're actually gonna use the leveling jacks of the coach to lift it up slightly to be able to make taking the shocks off easier. If you do not have leveling jacks, you will need to jack the coach up a little bit and put a jack stand underneath the frame to support the coach, because we will want the suspension to droop all the way out, making that change easier, especially if you're doing this in your driveway. All right, so we have the wheels off now. You're gonna use a 22 millimeter to take off those lug nuts. So now you can see we have our factory shock in here. So you have two ways to take this off. You can either use a ratchet wrench and a secondary wrench and sit there forever because it's so hard to get into there. Or you can take a Sawzall and just simply cut the stud off to remove it. I'm gonna go the second way because I don't wanna be here forever. Those are the two ways to do it. You choose what's best for you at home. So you ordered your HTR kit and it finally arrived at your house and you're super excited to open up all the pieces and check them out. Let's do that here together as well. So what this is gonna be is first box is gonna be the steering stabilizer. So you're gonna have all of your hardware necessary to install this. You're also going to have the brackets. Now what's awesome about these brackets is they're made right here at our facility. We build and cut and weld all of these things right here, made in America. Now, another thing, of course, we love the Fox shocks because they are also made in the USA as well. These things are awesome. We can unpackage this. All right. So what you're gonna have is you're gonna have your tie rod tab. This is gonna mount with the U-bolts in this package to your tie rod. This is going to mount to your frame. I'm gonna show you guys how to do that. You will need a 3/8 drill bit in order to to drill these holes where they're going to go. So there is some drilling required in order to mount the steering stabilizer. We're gonna show you how to do all this, and if you don't know, you wanna read the instructions, I'll put a link down below. You can read the instructions on how to do this as well. All right, this is your Fox steering stabilizer. This thing is all wrapped up, and you can see that it's actually also got the banding on it to hold this shorter because it will extend out. These are gonna have bushings in both ends. We do make a king steering stabilizer if you elect to do that, and that's gonna have bearings in it with our 2, 4, and 6-inch kits. All right, so now we wanna see the shocks. So when you get the shocks, keep in mind there's gonna be two different size shocks. The shorter shock, this little guy, see how cute this is? The little baby shock goes up in the front. The longer shock will go in the back. And as I open this, let me show you this too. This is gonna be key. When you're tightening up these shocks and installing them, naturally you feel really strong and you start tightening up this bolt, the nut here. Don't over tighten the nut. When the vehicle is sitting on the ground, you just want the nut snug. You don't need to torque that thing down so these bushings completely flatten out. If you do that, what happens is as your suspension starts to articulate, the stud can actually break out of the shock. So let's make sure that we don't get too excited. I mean, how could you not be excited about these shocks? Let's not get too excited, over tighten the nuts and create a problem down the road. So here, this is another way that you can tell. So your rear shock is gonna have the strap on it, but you can see like the difference in size from your front to your rear shock. So definitely a lot bigger shock. Just make sure, you don't put them on the wrong side or wrong end of the vehicle, front or back. But this is your front shock and that is gonna be your rear Fox shock. All right, so this is your radius arm right here, and you can see this post. That's where the bottom part of the shock is going to mount. Now that's gonna be an 18mm nut, but you actually are gonna have to go inside the radius arm in order to remove that nut and pull the shock off. So on the passenger side, you do have a little bit more room to get a ratchet in this side, or you can just cut this as well like we did on the driver's side. I would also recommend that you take a floor jack and slightly put pressure on this I-beam so that it doesn't come apart like it did on the driver's side with me. The coil is gonna be held in by this retaining nut, so the whole front end isn't gonna come apart, just keeping it a little bit safer for you guys. So you can use a 15mm up top and a 13/16 down here below. Or you could just take a pair of vice grips as well and get vice grips on there. So whatever is going to be easier for you. However, I'm gonna go with the easy one. I'm just gonna Sawzall it and cut it off. All right, so we're ready to install our Fox shocks on the front of this. You're gonna have the bushing will slide up in there, and then I'm gonna be able to put the top bushing, the washer, and the nut all up on there. Typically, I'll put this through the hole and spin the shock to get it tight, and then put a ratchet wrench on there and still just spin it all the way tight, not over tightening it, just getting it nice and snug. This is a steering stabilizer that we use on all the Ford E series. So this is gonna cover everything from your E-150 van, E-250 van, E-350 van, E-350 RV, or E-450 RV. So one part is going to do it all. So let's take a look at the parts that are gonna be all included in this kit. Let's start off with the biggest, coolest thing in there, and that's gonna be the Fox steering stabilizer. You're gonna have your frame mounting bracket. This is gonna mount to the frame, and we're gonna show you how to do that. This is going to be your tie rod mounting bracket. This is all the hardware in order to mount your U-bolts, in order to mount your bracket to your tie rod. This is going to be all your 1/2" hardware in order to mount your both shock ends right here to both of your brackets. And then these 4 3/8 bolts are going to be the hardware to mount your bracket to the frame. So, pretty straightforward so far. So here's the tools that you're going to need in order to install this. First, you're gonna need a drill. You're gonna need a 3/8 drill bit. We're gonna have to drill 4 holes into the frame in order to mount this bracket. The next thing that you're going to need is you're gonna need a 9/16 socket, and you're gonna need a 9/16 wrench. That's gonna be to tighten all the 3/8 bolts. The next thing that you're gonna need is a 3/4 inch socket and a 3/4 inch wrench. That's gonna be to tighten your 1/2 inch stuff. Of course, if you wanna use a ratchet or an impact, that's totally up to you. But those are the parts that are gonna be included in the kit, and those are gonna be all the tools that you need to install this. All right, so we're gonna install the steering stabilizer, and we're gonna start with the frame mount bracket. Now, to make this job easier, we're gonna actually remove both tie rods from the knuckle. So we're gonna need to take the cotter pin out of the bottom and then use a 21mm socket. And then I'm gonna just hit the spindle hard in order to free up the tie rod end. With that out of the way, it's gonna be a lot simpler to get in with a drill in order to mount the bracket as well as put in the rest of the steering stabilizer. Let me show you how. So right here, we're going to remove the 3 bolts that are holding the OEM factory steering stabilizer bracket to the frame. After that, we're going to move to the tie rod and remove the U-bolts from the tie rod, completely removing the OEM steering stabilizer. Next, you're going to prepare the frame for the new steering stabilizer bracket. In doing that, we're going to remove the hard line for the brakes as well as the wiring from the cross member. We want to get this completely out of the way. Now here's a pro tip for you. If you want to get a little bit more room, you can remove both tie rod ends from the knuckle. That will provide you a little extra room to get the drill in to drill your holes for the WeldTec Designs steering stabilizer bracket on the frame side. So I've already moved the lines out of the way. These lines are just fastened right here on this cross member. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to fit it up in there. And you can see now that this bracket kind of contours this cross member. So once you have that marked or setting up there, I'm going to take it and I'm going to mark my first hole. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and pull the bracket off. I'm going to drill the first hole right there. The one other tool I forgot you should have, make sure you guys wear safety glasses when using drill bits. Alright guys, so what I'm doing now is I'm taking the first 3/8 bolt and I'm attaching it to the cross member there. And the way I'm doing this, when it all gets assembled, you're putting a flat washer on the bracket side and then on the frame side and then your lock washer. So now what I can do is I can go ahead, I'll tighten up this bracket. And now once I've gotten that tightened, I'll go ahead and drill my next hole. Alright, there it is. So the bracket is mounted up on the frame. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to mount the tie rod part, and that's going to actually hang right here. First, I'm going to have to get the rest of this front end back on. Obviously, that made it really easy for mounting this bracket when the steering is out of the way. You're still able to do it even if your tie rods are there. I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this front end put together, and then we'll show you how to install the shock and the tie rod mounting bracket. Alright guys, so you can see we have the steering, and then we also have this awesome Baja grocery getter kit now is all installed on the front of this Ford van. So we're going to go back to finishing putting the rest of the steering stabilizer on. And what you're going to do next is you're going to go ahead and take this, you can put it up in there. You're going to go ahead and take your bolt, drop your bolt down in the hole, and there you go. So now you can see that your second bracket is going to go over here. So this is going to kind of give you an idea of where this bracket, that second bracket, is going to go. All right guys, so what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and take your U-bolts, get those put in your bracket. And now what you can do is we're going to go ahead and put all of our lock washers and flat washers on there. Alright guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of snug all of these bolts up right here. This is going to be the easiest position before I rotate this bracket in the position that it's going to go. That's when I'm going to need the wrench, just because there's a little more stuff up there in the way in order to get these things all tight. Alright, so once I get this You can kind of see that that hose is a little bit tight in there, but still, I'm gonna get this one snugged up, and then I want to show you guys this. So when you come over here and look, you're gonna see this is your pitman arm right here. So with all of our Baja Grocery Getter kits, we do not use a drop pitman arm. You don't need to, because we're not dropping down the brackets. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your new bracket for your steering stabilizer at the same angle as your pitman arm. So I can see, I'm gonna just rotate this. You can see that's gonna go about right there. And now I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna tighten up all the rest of these bolts. All right, so now that you have this bracket on, the next part is you're going to install the second side of your steering stabilizer with your second 1/2 inch bolt. We're gonna do that the same way. We're gonna drop it through the bottom here. Now this is the fun part here. So right now, first what we have is we've taken your steering and turned it all the way to the left or to the driver's side. What that's doing is that's putting the pitman arm at its farthest point away. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna have to compress the shock in order to put this bolt in the eyelet of the shock. Another thing that that's gonna do is it's never going to allow the steering stabilizer to fully extend and pull out of the shock. So that's something that's also important. When we're all done, we'll go back and forth and make sure that it doesn't overextend or extend or overly compress. So now the fun part. So you can see, you just got to kind of muscle that thing over, get it to drop in there. And then what we're going to do is take our other flat washer, our lock washer, and then our nut. And now that we got that all on there, we can do the same thing to the other side and then tighten down all of our bolts. Okay, so now guys, you can go ahead and tighten that down. That's going to be a 3/4 inch right there. All right guys, so that's it. The steering stabilizer is installed. Yes, I will wipe that down because as you can see, the underneath of this thing is really dirty. So I'll make sure I clean up that Fox steering stabilizer because I know someone's gonna comment on that. So here's another little tip and trick that I like to do on these. So you can see you have this hose, which is your radiator hose that kind of hangs down. Typically it does not, but I don't like how close these bolts can come to this. So if you can see right here, you already have a hole in your radiator fan shroud right there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put another hole right about here, so about 1.5 inches away. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna secure that hose up there to get it completely out of the way. Now I forgot to, this is still, you can use just that normal 3/8 drill bit. We're just gonna come up in here. So I've put it in one hole and I'm bringing it out the other. And now I'm just gonna take this and pull that up tight. Now that's just gonna secure that up against the shroud. I'm gonna cut the rest of that zip tie off. So that's a little tip there just to get that hose up and out of the way a little bit more. Give that bracket a little bit more room for clearance. So the next step in what we're gonna do is we're gonna get in the car. We're gonna turn the wheels all the way to the passenger side. Make sure that this shaft right here doesn't wanna overly compress, and when it's all the way closed that it still has a little bit of room right here and is not compressing into the body of the shock. All right guys, so you can see we've turned the wheels now all the way to the other side, and even there's still, you have room in there. That shock is not going to get fully compressed right there. So what would happen is if the shock was fully compressed, you may just want to put a mark right here on your tie rod, and then you would just slightly move this up the tie rod, maybe 1/4 of an inch to give it a little bit more space. So Really simple to do. You guys can install this in, under an hour. All right, so it's time to remove the rear shocks. For this, we're gonna start off with a 15mm to remove the nut on the top portion of the shock. When spinning that nut, you're also gonna wanna hold the body of the shock in order to help it. Otherwise, the whole thing is going to spin together. Once the nut is completely removed, you're going to remove the bottom portion of the shock using an 18mm. And then once the shock is completely removed, we're going to use a pair of pliers and a razor blade to cut the bushing out of the shock. You're not going to want that in when putting the new shock in. It's going to come with a new set of bushings. All right, so it's super difficult to get into the rear to show you how this is going to go. You're gonna have your bottom bushing and your bottom washer. This is going to slide into the hole on the frame where you cut the old bushing out. You're gonna have a second bushing that's gonna go on top of your frame, a washer, and then your nut. Go ahead and secure all this, and the big thing is don't over tighten it. You just need it snug. So that's my pro tip on installing the rear shocks on your E350 or E450. All right, so we've installed one side of the Fox shock. Now we're gonna go ahead and repeat all those same steps, install the second side of it. Once you guys get that done, well, now you've properly installed your WeldTec Designs HTR suspension on your E350 or E450. This is going to ride amazing. Would love to hear what you guys think of the new ride in the comments down below.